Hollow Knight is a runaway indie hit and a truly wonderful game, as listeners to this podcast doubtless know from listening to me and Jason rave about it endlessly. The game is a side-scrolling Metroidvania set in a mysterious underground insect kingdom. It was developed by the Australian indie outfit Team Cherry. It was partially funded by a 2014 Kickstarter and then released on PC in 2017, where it quickly became a commercial and critical success. It reached new echelons of both of those types of success when it came to Switch back in June, which is when I finally managed to play it. It is a very big and dense game, yet it was primarily the work of a very small team led by two guys that I am very excited to have on the show with me today. First, from Team Cherry, we have William Pellen. Hi, William.
Hey, Kirk. Thanks for having us.
We are also joined by William's Team Cherry co-director, Ari Gibson. Hello, Ari.
Hello, Kirk. Great to be here.
I'm very happy to have you guys here just to sort of geek out about this game. I think it is really, really good. And I guess let's just start. Can you just tell me some of the genesis of this idea, a game about a kingdom of bugs? Where did the idea come from? How did you come up with it?
Yeah, so Ari and I had done a few game jams probably during 2014. Okay. Just, we started talking about both wanting to, I'd been doing sort of games as a hobby thing, and Ari had been working as an animator, but also working on games, doing cutscenes and things. Yeah, so we were interested in trying out working together on something small. So we've got game jams hosted here in Adelaide, and the very first one we did was a Ludum Dare, was it? Or was it Global Game Jam? I can't remember, but the theme was 10 seconds. And so the idea we came for, so a game jam that we had 72 hours to create like a quick game. So it was me, Ari, and another friend of ours, Rowan, working on it. And the theme was 10 seconds. And the game we built was like a really short flash game. We played as a little bug knight character that went around eating cherries and had to eat cherries every 10 seconds. Otherwise, he turned into dust. And that was kind of the beginning of the idea of like the bug theme.
Yeah, so that not only was that was our first short game together.
Yeah.
The main character is actually went on to become the Hollow Knight.
Oh, yeah, the game's called Hungry Knight.
The game is called Hungry Knight, and the character is.
Oh, I feel like I've heard of this.
The character
I've seen
is
people
identical.
talking about it.
Yeah, so the character is actually the same sprites that we just hacked up and used for a further game jam. I can't remember, but this one, I can't remember what it was, but the theme for that one was Beneath the Surface. So, and from that, the intent was to make a platformer reusing the sprites of that character, giving it a jump and whatnot. And though we didn't make the cutoff time for the jam, we just ended up developing that further in our own time, and that eventually became the game Hollow Knight.
Yeah, the basic idea that we had, which was a bug night in a bug world, and thinking about the type of game that you could create with the theme Beneath the Surface, was that's kind of the genesis of the thing that became Hollow Knight.
The bug thing is likely also just because you have the game jam restriction. Yeah, so it's not some grand plan. It's just that when you're thinking, oh, we've got 72 hours, you tend to think of what can we make quickly and easily. And bugs are just something. One, they're like small, so probably your brain goes to that anyway. But they're also they're kind of easily captured. You could pretty much just draw an oval and put two lines through the oval, and you have something that already looks like a bug.
You say it wasn't, it was a game jam game. It was very small. How did it balloon to the size of the game that you wound up making into Hollow Knight? I mean, where did that happen? That scope increase?
That's just how we make things. Because everything is just
they just
built,
get uncontrollably big.
We just allow that to happen. I think it's more like we have a very simple core to Hollow Knight. It's really like there's a big door to the boss, and there's three keys to open the door, and then along the way we come up with things that make us laugh or we think are interesting, and we just go for it until we're too tired to do any more.
The core of it, was right there from the start, which was there's some kind of plague in this insect world. There's a big door. The source of the plague is there behind it, and there's these three guardians or dreamers that end up being called that you have to go hunt down to defeat, and then you can open the door and fight the last boss. We just kept working on it, towards the end of 2014, and then eventually it got to a point where we thought, if we had a Kickstarter that we could kind of gauge the market and see if we could get enough cash to just build it into like a small 2 or 3 hour kind of product and deliver it, and then it just got filled out. It got inflated. But you can see like that skeleton of the original game is the basic idea is all there. It's just it just kind of expanded outwards as we filled it with stuff.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, and that's like, I feel like that's a really old story that's going all the way back to that Double Fine adventure where they're like, yeah, we'll just make a little game for a documentary, and then it, expanded into this massive thing. Did you always plan to make it a Metroidvania? I mean, there are these sort of very distinct elements in the game, the sort of souls mechanic with losing your geo when you get killed, the way that it's very clearly inspired by those sorts of, Metroidvania, Castlevania, Metroid games. Were you thinking about that as you were, coming up with the game and fleshing it out, like during that initial Kickstarter pitch, or did that come later?
I think at that point it was already using the Metroid template.
Yeah, we had a bunch of games. I mean, there's like a bunch of games that we kind of both liked and that we based a lot of the stuff in the game.
What are the games that people? Everyone says it's a Metroidvania, but what are the games, the influences that people don't always immediately identify?
We cite 3 primary references, and those references are Zelda 2, Metroid, and Farzanadu, which is another NES era adventure type game. Probably and I think the other big influence that ended up being in there is Mega Man X.
Yeah, and Mega Man Zero as well. And
Mega Man Zero. So that probably wasn't something we cited at the start. We did end up referencing that quite a bit in making the game. Yeah. It's funny because we say Zelda 2 and everyone goes, oh man, Zelda 2. But every time we say every time we say Farzanadu, which is probably the one that it is the most closely aligned to, everyone just goes, oh, what? Oh.
Yeah, I actually don't know that game. What's Farzanadu? Tell me a little bit about this game.
It's pretty similar to Zelda 2 in a way, in that it's like a 2D side scroller on the NES. You're like a little guy with a sword and a shield. The world is like a huge world tree that you start at the bottom, you climb up. It doesn't have levels and stuff though. It's like a world that you travel through and go onto the tree and find dungeons and then move on to the next town, get some new armor and stuff.
Yeah, so Hollow Knight is it's sort of an inverted version of that, where that one's about kind of reaching the top to an extent. This one's about descending down further and further.
And so I mean, when we were making the game, obviously, like the blueprint for it was a lot of those games like Metroid and Castlevania, but we weren't super conscious of like staying true to the genre or anything like that. If it was just what we thought would be fun or what made sense, what we wanted to make.
Yeah, the blueprint is you get a double jump and you get a dash at some point, and those can help us. Those can help us just pass out the content a little bit more. So ultimately, as we kept building the game, we started breaking a lot of that down and allowing people a lot more choice anyway. And
like chipping away, the basic outline of the game at the start, especially because it was pretty small, was like a much more rigid kind of traditional. This power up first, then this power up, and you could you follow that through the game. And then as the game expanded and as we kept working on it, we kept finding interesting connections between areas that didn't exist. So we kind of chipped away at the floor or the ceiling to kind of allow you to move between areas a little more freely.
Man, I want to ask a million questions about the map, but I guess I want to ask about the story first, because I think I've seen somewhere that you guys said that you kind of came up with the story after you had designed everything and sort of built the story more, to like the scaffolding was already there and you put the story on top of it. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about just your process for writing the story of this game?
Yeah, I've seen that quote as well. I think that's possibly a little inaccurate. It's more like it's
one of the details came after.
Yeah, it is. There is narrative, but it's kind of like it's like swimming on. It's all sort of swimming around, and it's a bit. It just wasn't locked down. Was probably the point of it. And then and it wasn't until we got to that very last point that we started locking in things into place. So after we had a lot of the bones of the game,
an idea of how you move through the world, and in which order you encounter things.
Yeah.
Like
so we just didn't let
it was changing.
We didn't want to be impeded by a narrative that we'd set up earlier and then have a realization or learn something in making the game and want to go down a tangent and then find out that we couldn't because we had some story, like some narrative construct that prevented us from doing that.
Yeah, I mean, the core of it, we sort of kind of mentioned it before, but the core basic idea of the story and the setting was there from the start. And that's what we built from for most of the development. And then, as we sort of built new characters and new areas, and kind of and created the world in a way that we tried to think about when we're adding bits to the world, kind of what makes sense for this kingdom to have, and that starts to kind of inform the history of the world and stuff. And even just things like as we worked out the mechanics of the game, things like you can heal yourself by absorbing soul from creatures and then stopping and focusing. And that stuff started to then inform, why can the character do that? What makes sense if you can get soul from these, other sources around the world, or, when you find a spell, what is the spell doing there? What connection does it have to the other spells of the world and stuff like that? And things just kind of piece themselves together.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like, and I'm basing some of this on reading the AMA you guys did, which listeners, they did an AMA that's pretty cool. You should check it out. And it sounded in some ways like you were talking about the story as if you were also discovering it, which I think is a feeling that a lot of storytellers have when they're writing a story, is it almost feels like some of the story was just there and you uncovered it. And in the process that you're describing sort of sounds like that. There was some question, and I don't remember the specifics, but that's probably fine for my purposes here. But it almost sounded as though you weren't sure the answer because it's left ambiguous. A lot of the story is left, with sort of not filled in and ambiguous. And I thought that was just fascinating to see someone who controls this fictional universe and wrote this story kind of say, well, I don't know, actually, I'm not sure about that. Do you feel that way about the story, that there are things about it that you don't know for sure, some of the unanswered questions that people have?
Yeah, I think sure. And absolutely, we have our own sort of theories, and perhaps in some of those William and I
you have your own theories about your own game.
We can disagree on stuff as well.
I actually also think that point of exploring the narrative goes into the way we built the game, which is that the game, building the game is actually just like being pioneers in this world, and it works perfectly because it's like a cave system, and you basically, as you're building these new areas, you're just digging into these new caves and finding out for the first time what is actually in there. And because we had such a fluid, kind of light and easy creation method, obviously there was a lot of time, but it was a pretty simple process. We could a lot of the world was built from us saying, I got to the end of this pathway, but what could be beyond this path? And then finding out as you travel. So there's this, I'm in a tramway, but this tram path has been all ruined and they've stopped development. But what stopped this development? And then you think, well, I would love to see what's on the other side of that. So you build that out yourself. And then by the time you get there, you're like, look, I found an interesting character here, and then
it's about allowing ideas to lead on to other ideas. I mean, another one is we had the idea, I think, pretty early on about having like an underground city that is perpetually raining, which is the City of His Tears, which is like kind of the centerpiece of the map. And then eventually the question comes up, which is where is the water coming from? So the idea is like, well, there must be like some body of water somewhere and it's raining down, and we can have a character mention that, and then that's enough. And then we thought, well, there is actually a space on the map above the city, and it's kind of a cop out if you don't actually ever see this body of water. And so we had, so we add it, and then that, by adding that lake, you kind of get a lake shore area as well, and then that naturally is kind of, because it's sandwiched between areas, you sort of think about, well, what would it actually be connected to? If characters are visiting this lake, as some characters do, where would they actually be traveling through? Stuff like that.
I love that. I specifically love that specific thing that you just talked about, the location of the lake above the city. I think I've talked about that on the podcast before. That's a wonderful little touch. And I like that you're talking about the process of storytelling, which a lot of people would describe as feeling like excavating a story. And then you're literally, excavating because you're writing a story that's underground. So that's very cool. I know that the two of you weren't the only ones who made this game. And I feel like I should just ask, who are the other, I think I know the names of the people involved, but who are the other people that you feel should sort of get recognition for working on the game as well?
Yeah, so after we did the Kickstarter, we sort of started working on the game properly. We got an office in town. We brought in Dave Kazi. It's a friend of mine. So he was a technical director. One of the big reasons that because we had been making the game in Stencil, which is like a program kind of like Game Maker, because I used it, and I didn't know how to code or anything, but it has like one of those interfaces where you kind of just like snap bits of logic together, and I could do that. But during the Kickstarter, we realized that in order to be able to kind of work on the game at a bigger scale and also get it onto consoles and stuff, we had to move to Unity. So David used Unity, so we brought him in. So for the duration of Hollow Knight, the three of us were the ones working on the game full time. We also brought in Chris Larkin, who's local as well, who did the music and sound design. I think maybe he approached us during the Kickstarter.
I'd previously worked with Chris.
How did that happen?
So,
how did you meet him?
I'd done a lot of animation work with Chris, and he'd worked on things with me in the past. So I had a relationship with him. This is obviously a much larger body of work than he'd produced with me before. But I certainly knew that he was up to the challenge.
Yeah, he sent us some speculative kind of like musical sketches type of thing.
Was it like recordings of him? So I have to ask: is the Flukemon? I at some point I feel like I need to interview Chris because I love his music and I love the sound design he did for the game. Is the Flukemon sound effect, that horrible sound effect? Is that him?
Is that when it's walking around like this?
Yes, it is exactly that. That's you. Oh man, that was one of my burning questions. Was who created that? So whose horrible mouth am I listening to? So it's you. Oh, that's very funny.
We did a lot of the voices. Well, most of the voices. I mean, I already mentioned it before we started, but we do them here in like our little cramped kitchenette with our mic. So like I mean, the most of the game is voiced by Ari, me, and Makoto, who shares an office with us. She's like an illustrator. She did voices for like Hornet and probably 90% of the female voices in the game. And then we also got like friends and family in. So my mum did a few voices.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, my wife Vicky did Iselda up in the Mapper shop. Dave did Cornifer.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, so we pretty much got everyone to do every voice they possibly could.
It's just like, what's the weirdest voice?
We had like 5 people or 6 people stretched to do 60 characters or whatever it was. It was
I remember because we were doing it during summer as well, and we had to turn off the air conditioner because it was too loud.
Oh yeah.
So I was in the kitchen just making these croaking and gargling and dying and screaming noises.
Oh man, that's really cool. Yeah, I like fun. All of the human sounds in that. Those games, have you played any of those, like Machinarium or Botanicula, any of those games?
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Guys do a lot of mouth sounds for their sound effects. I've always loved, or the old SimCity, the zzz sound that's just some person doing it. I think it's actually maybe
yeah, you get heaps of mileage out of really simple, like a small amount of really simple voice clips.
You also get much more of like a human kind of connection with the characters in the world. Like the best thing we could have done to make these bugs relatable is just give them human voices, and maybe the cheapest thing we could have done as well.
Yeah, it's cool how those things tend to kind of dovetail sometimes. So getting back to the story and the way that you kind of designed this world, there's so much in this game that's very easy to miss. And we've talked a lot with a lot of game designers over the years about how you kind of reconcile wanting people to see everything and, knowing that you kind of can't just make them see everything, or you ruin some of that mystery and some of that surprise. How did you approach that balancing act as you were making the game, knowing that there are just some secrets that some people will just, or a lot of people maybe will just never see?
We didn't stress too much about it. And we definitely don't think that we didn't build something, it's probably obvious from the game, that we expect people to see everything as they go through. Well, all we think is, as we're making content, is that someone will probably see this stuff. And if people come upon it and uncover something new and feel like maybe this is something that not everyone has discovered, that makes it more special for that person. Yeah. That makes the experience a lot more impactful than feeling like, oh, I found this thing. I've seen this thing, but everyone's probably seen this because the director's hands have nudged me to see.
Funneled through. It's like that feeling of. I mean, one of the things that we kind of liked about playing games like Zelda 2 or Xanadu as a kid, especially because games are kind of really new back there, obviously, so the rules aren't really set in stone. It's not like now where everyone's super savvy. Is the feeling that there could be anything like hidden around the corner, or there could be any like crazy secret or weird creature and stuff. And so, in an attempt to replicate that, we just try to make sure that there was stuff in the world so that if you did, people had the feeling that if they did find a breakable wall or whatever, or like hunt out a secret, there could be anything behind it. It could be, a stinky egg, or it could be a whole new area with its own boss. and stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like the Hive is a good example of that. I stumbled on that, and it doesn't, I think I played it after on Switch, so after all the DLC was out, and there was kind of more to do there than I think there was initially when the game came out.
Yeah, we added a boss and got like a visual overhaul.
A boss that was surprisingly hard for me, actually. I'm not really sure why. When I look back at the fight, I was like, it's a pretty straightforward fight. I don't know why that one was tough for me. But that feeling of sort of, I think I blasted through a wall and then suddenly realized, there's this whole other area there, was definitely cool. Though I guess I could see both sides of it. Like, did you ever feel like there was a time where you were, I don't know, like holding people's hands too much and you had to walk that back? Like you had to kind of step back and say, no, they'll find it or they won't and it'll be okay?
I don't think we ever felt like we were railroading people or anything.
I think, it's easy to underestimate how good people are finding stuff. I don't think we overhit or underhit anything, but you do, like, once you actually have people playing the game, you realize that something that you thought would take a week or 2 weeks to get found, it's actually more like an hour. Even before people start like data mining it and stuff, people are smash through everything.
Yeah, we certainly recognize that the internet is there and will always display everything that exists.
Yeah, and if you want to go online and sort of look up everything you've missed or play along, then that's cool. But and at the same time, if you're keen on just going through blind and muddling through, and you manage to stumble on one or two kind of really surprising things, then that's cool as well.
Yeah, I think I kind of muddled through for about 80% of the game, and then there came a point where I just had to start looking stuff up. Are there any secrets in the game that people have not yet found?
No, I don't.
I don't think so.
No, because because you can get data mined.
Yeah, I mean, people dug up rooms that were half finished, that were just disconnected from the game. Like everything gets uprooted at like the base level. It's ridiculous. Like some of the stuff, half of the stuff that the people have modded out of the game, we couldn't even remember it was still in there ourselves.
You're like, we made that? I don't even remember that existing. Oh, that's funny. I have a few specific questions about things in the game that I'm just sort of wondering about. First one, how did you decide where to put a stag station? I've always imagined that this is a challenging problem with a game like this, where you want people to have to travel, but you don't, but you don't want them to be right next to where they're going to be, but you don't want them to have to travel too far. So how did you make that decision? Where does each stag station go?
There's a few elements to it. One is what feels natural within the world. Then the other one is we have to test the game ourselves for months and months. So we, like, as testers, it's really annoying if there aren't enough quick ways to get to places. So we probably end up incorporating that idea as well. And then that idea ends up probably feeding through to just players' experience, which is making sure that because we're making sure for ourselves that we have like a reasonably quick access to every part of the world, then players get to experience the same sort of balance.
Yeah, and I think you guys added one after the fact, right? Was that the hidden station got added in a DLC? Was that sort of based on that same?
Yeah, that was a lot. Yeah, that was, and realistically, that was one of the ones that
I think
made
we
sense.
had kind of discussed maybe adding one before,
I think we thought it was in conflict with the tram access, but I think the tram access ended up being a little bit more hidden or something.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people never get the tram pass.
Yeah.
The tram is funny, right? Because it's like a second fast travel system that makes sense in the world, but it is, you have two fast travel systems, so I could kind of see that.
Yeah. And maybe it felt like the grounds of the palace, it kind of felt it made a bit more sense if it was slightly more remote and didn't have like a stag station right next to it. I think after a lot more people played it, we thought about it. We thought it was a decent addition, so we put it in that as part of that first content pack.
Yeah, it was definitely valuable for me. Okay, next one is, what was the process like fine-tuning the sword attack? I really am amazed by how good it feels to swing your sword at something, and part of that is the way that it knocks your character back. How did you approach balancing that and making that work the way that it does?
It was in there pretty quickly. The basics of your sword attack were one of the first things that were made. And I mean, Ari mentioned Mega Man before, and the control of the character was always meant to have that kind of like that really sharp deceleration, sharp movement, and also like really quick actions. So why you've got like a quick sword slash. And then I think I was fighting, there's like an early boss, Grozma, that's like a big fly. And I was getting really annoyed because it kept flying over me and I couldn't attack upwards. So I coded in it upwards attacks and downwards attacks.
Like, damn it, I'm adding the ability to do this.
I mean, like Ari said, it's kind of by playing something a lot and being a player in it, you start to see the gaps pretty often. And kind of going back to your point, after I added a down attack as well because I was getting annoyed with enemies below me. And then I had that thing where, you'd attack an enemy downwards and then you damage it, but you'd fall into it as well, which felt really bad. So we put in like a bounce that propelled you upwards. Yeah,
and then the recoil that comes from a side slash was actually built from our first playtesting of the game.
Wow, really?
So the recoil was that players would often, especially players who weren't used to the sort of the zoning of the game, would run into enemies. And
so they'd hold right and mash attack.
And they keep trying to attack the enemy and they just end up taking damage because the game has contact damage. So initially there was the idea of a small bump, but it also gives you the added benefit of more physicality, of more feeling like you actually exist within the world.
It's also consistent with the down bash, the bouncing up into the down slash. So the fact that made you bounce and attacking sideways seem really weird to me.
For a long time near the start, there was a weird issue where you could slash very quickly in succession. And it made balancing really difficult at the time because
we did slow down.
Yeah, so that ended up getting slowed down a lot. And some players would just jump in there and wail away on these bosses and they would die super quick. And it just became, and then others who were more cautious would really suffer. So
it's funny because I feel like there are charm combinations that I use sometimes that let me do just that. But I guess I have to actively equip them, right?
That was like the normal slash speed.
Yeah, that was our way of, and things like the charm stuff was really, some of it was our way of bringing some of that stuff back because we enjoyed it.
Interesting. That makes sense.
And going from that as well, another thing that Ari kind of knows pretty quickly is once we've gotten all that physicality in for the nail, for the sword, of you bouncing off enemies and stuff, it started to seem really weird that you would attack the terrain in the world and your sword would kind of just go straight through, which is what usually happens in like a 2D game. And it made everything feel kind of flimsy or empty. So we added in the little dunk when you slash the wall and you get like a little bit of dirt plonks off and you get knocked back just a little bit. So
all that tactile stuff feels really good, I feel.
Yeah, so I mean the attack itself is like the simplest thing in the world. The slash turns on and off in like 0.2 of a second or something. But it's, by making things really, like everything around you really reactive, that's what actually makes it feel good to do. And, and again, playing it a million times, as we're testing it, it got us to think about what it's, kind of occupies you, it feels fun and makes you keep playing. And that's stuff like, being able to bounce off enemies, smacking the wall and bouncing off, having lots of barrels and grass around that you can cut and break, and you can watch all the bits and pieces flying around.
Having great hit reactions from enemies and a fantastic sound effect for the hit of the crunch of your weapon against an enemy.
I was going to ask about that. The sound effect when you get hit that low pass filter is really, really intense. Did you worry that was too intense? I feel like a lot of people say they thought they died the first time they get hit.
That kept getting escalated because...
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that was because your health is so low in Hollow Knight. And each of your masks, your health indicators, is so integral and important that we needed to convey that really, really well and really clearly, because it can be a big deal to take 2 hits in the game. You could potentially suddenly be on half your health.
We also laid on a lot of low health effects. as well.
That was the last.
We had issues with people not realizing that they only had 1 hit left, which is fair enough because it's a tiny white mask in the top left.
Yeah, so it's a lot of it is just to keep saying, remember to heal, basically. Like, look,
your brain is kind of like counting the amount of times you've seen this gump, and you know how much health you have. So it kind of helps that.
What was the thought process behind Millibelle the banker and coming up with that? I think that's one of my favorite video game jokes I've encountered in a long time.
We were talking about the idea of a bank, and then Williams, something was like, oh yeah, what about a bank? And the retort was, well, only if she can take your money.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, and then it spiraled from there. And I should say, William was the one that pushed for, obviously this is a spoiler, but
that's okay. We can spoil
a method to track her down and retrieve your money. I was all for her just vanishing,
disappearing,
vanishing into the night, dangling. Yeah. So you can thank William if you managed to.
That would have been a different kind of funny. Just no
it would have still been funny, but it may be a harder joke to laugh about. That's funny. That's cool. So I have a few questions about the future. So you guys are doing a Hornet expansion. Is that's still happening?
Yep. We're working on that.
That is super exciting. And can you give us any sense of when it might be out?
Well, no, we can't because we don't know ourselves.
Yeah, we're sort of we don't want to start giving out dates until we're pretty confident.
Totally
it's something that is meaningful.
We also got slogged a bit this year with our Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox development. So
and even
Godmaster obviously experienced a significant delay as a result. And
it sounded like that was a challenge. You guys changed the name. What was the process there of making that last one?
The process was us receiving one of those sort of standard legal emails at
cease and desist.
Because it had the same name as something else
at 10:30 at night, and William giving me a call and saying, "Hey, did you see that email?" And us having just submitted the game 2 or 3 days earlier, and basically being to Nintendo, and
we had to pull down our submission, remove the references to the old name,
and then we spent a morning talking to this lawyer about other names that we could use, and every bloody name we came up with, the answer was, "Oh no, that one's taken. Oh no, that one's taken." But there is probably the end result of that was. The interesting part of that is because it's just the two of us and Jack, so the three who's replaced Dave now, who's helping us with the new stuff. Because we're so small, we can make those changes very quickly. We can kind of be quite nimble. So it's not. It was a bit of a shock, but it's not something we can't adapt to within 24 hours. And I suspect that's probably the advantage of being a tiny team.
Yeah, I can see that. Godmaster is a better name than Gods and Glory, in my opinion, anyway.
So nice.
I think you picked a winner. That is hard. That's like trying to name your band, and then you realize there's another band called that, and then you just spend a million years coming up with a name that you just don't like as much as your original name.
No one trademark it.
Yeah.
Please.
So last future question is, do you feel like you have more stories to tell from this world, or do you ever find yourselves fantasizing about just making other games? I would imagine it's been, many years working in this world of bugs and Metroid stuff. Do you have other stories to tell or other places that you would like to explore?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We've got plenty of ideas, like more than we can make probably in the next 10 years. But we've got it's easy to kind of come up with ideas and stuff. We've got one or two at least that we're pretty interested in moving forward with once we take a slight break from the world of Hollow Knight.
Yeah, probably the consistent thing is that they're loose, like Hollow Knight. They're fairly loose frameworks to work within. So the Hollow Knight framework we never felt it was restrictive on what we could create or what we could add to it, and just give it a slight buggy quality, and suddenly it's something interesting and distinct and part of that world. And we'll just make sure that those new worlds we're playing in allow us that same freedom.
Given that you guys have been so successful, I could see the temptation of expanding and hiring more people and becoming a kind of mid-sized indie studio. Do you think about that, or think about staying the same size?
Yeah, we think about it. I think is we've got to not do that, and it's just like a cultural thing. The game Hollow Knight, the game that we made that fortunately people quite like, it came about from us being a team that is this big, and specifically probably this team. And I think that if we added more people and started delegating a lot of those tasks, the quality of the game would change. And for now, we'd like to retain the same sort of quality in future games.
Nice. That seems like a wise way to look at things. So we're almost out of time, but I want to do a series of lightning round questions, which when I do lightning rounds, they tend to turn into longer answers, but I always tell people to try to have short answers.
Sure.
So I'm just going to ask you some questions, mostly about Hollow Knight, about your favorite things or whatever. If I ask a favorite thing, you can each say one. If it's just a thing with one answer, one of you can go. We'll go one right after the other. We're going to try to get through them all. Are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
Go for it.
Okay, first lightning round question. What is your favorite charm in the game?
Gathering Swarm.
Defender's Crest.
All right. What is your favorite region?
Kingdom's Edge.
God Home.
Okay, this next one, I think I know the answer, so I have a follow-up prepared, but here's the question. What is your favorite enemy?
It's not... I really like Flugmon.
Oh, all right.
I like those giant spiders, and I can't even remember what we called them. The ones where they're like...
They're called
heads
stalking something. Stalking devout?
Yeah, they're just weird, and their like face splits open and is their arms.
Oh, yeah, I know those guys. Nice. Yeah. I actually thought you were going to say the primal aspid, which is...
I knew I said enough for that.
Because my follow-up question was going to be, what is wrong with you? But you didn't say that, so that's not my follow-up question. Okay, next question. Can you both beat every challenge in the game?
No.
I haven't done Path of Pain start to finish yet, I think. Or maybe I have. I did in the end.
You did it once.
Have you beaten all the Godmaster stuff?
I haven't done... No, definitely not. Because, I mean, if you're including, like, doing an all-binding like run, then...
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever do that.
Yeah, we made a friend of ours who's done a lot of testing on the game go through that gauntlet.
Yeah, I could if I wanted to. That's the answer.
I'm okay at Hollow Knight. I'm not really that good. And I watched a video of somebody doing the Absolute Radiance with, if you get hit a single time, you die. And I was basically screaming at an ever-escalating volume the entire video. I'm sure you've seen videos of people doing this. It was outrageous. Listeners, go watch it. Even if you've never played Hollow Knight, just go find a video of someone doing it. Because it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah. People are amazing.
Yeah, we can't be like that. If we get too good at the game, we'll lose perspective on... We'll make challenges way too hard.
Yeah, I can see that. It's hard enough, guys. It's definitely hard enough. Okay, next question. What happened to Quirrell?
We don't know.
Yeah, we're not sure.
Okay. Next question. Was the king having an affair with Hera the Beast?
We can't...
we probably shouldn't...
We can't answer lore things too explicitly. You can make up your own mind.
Yeah.
Okay, you can punt on that. That's fine. Okay, next question. When you go to fight the Radiants for the first time, Hornet yells something that sounds like, "Get good." Get good! Is she actually telling me to get good?
It's a happy coincidence.
Is the actual word gektu?
I believe it's gek-tu.
Or gektu.
Something like that.
It's not quite that, but believe me, I fought the Radiants like 7,000 times.
You know what that means.
Yeah, that's true.
So it could be an equivalent kind of meaning to get
she's
good.
Psyching you up to go fight the Radiants.
It seems too good to be true. Like, this has to be... Yeah.
Yeah, I did it so many times that I started hearing that and then realized that a lot of other people had heard it and pointed the same thing out online. But I was just sitting there like, okay, I get it, Hornet. I'm not good enough to beat the Radiant. Stop telling me to do that. Okay, next question. Do either of you actually use nail arts?
I use Cyclone sometimes for fun.
I use Great Slash.
Okay. Next question. Why were the Mantis tribe members unaffected by the plague?
There is a very good reason for that. But
extremely good.
Well, there is legit.
I'm not being that.
And nor is it that far.
You can probably extrapolate why, but we probably won't.
I think there may be something in the text there that sort of clarifies it.
Okay, last question. Is Grubfather a villain, or is eating his grubs simply a normal thing for his species to do?
William?
Not sure. It's weird.
Not sure.
It's weird. I was surprised when I saw it. We all were.
Yeah, it was quite a shock.
Yes, I was disappointed, but then they kind of don't sound like they're upset to be in his stomach, was my thinking. So I felt like I was rationalizing to myself that I'd watched this horrible thing and I really didn't want to believe it was bad. So you guys aren't sure.
Bugs do a lot of strange things. Who are we to judge them?
That's true, but they're bugs. They're not humans. That's probably a healthy way to look at things. Well, we're out of time. Ari and William, I really had a great time talking to you. I really, really like your video game. Listeners, go play Hollow Knight if you haven't yet. What are you doing? It's very good. I guess we can keep an eye out for the Hornet DLC at some point in the future. Is there anywhere people can sort of follow you guys to keep an eye on what's going on?
Yeah, Twitter's probably the best place.
Okay.
And we do have a blog, and normally when we post on the blog, we post it on Twitter as well.
Yeah, and we will start talking about Hornet as we get towards it being done.
Yeah, for sure. Nice. We like sharing stuff as we make the game.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it seems like you guys are very open about everything. Well, cool. I'll put links to those things in the show notes. William and Ari, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Cheers, Kirk.
Thanks, Kirk.